So I've been reflecting on my journey the past couple years with getting into tech, and it's been a very surprising and kind of somewhat unexpected journey, at least with the different kind of pivots that I made. So I just want to spend a little bit of time talking about some of the things that I've realized. So before I do that, let me crack open my drink that I'm going to be having, which is a Waterloo lemon lime seltzer water. So let me crack this open, take a sip, and we will start chatting here. Very crisp. Yeah, so I've been thinking about my journey with tech, and I guess there's a lot of things that I was just sort of not anticipating. And the first is probably the biggest thing that I've come to realize is that, so when I first got into, or wanted to get into tech, it was not only a way to get out of the healthcare job that I was doing, but it was also to get into a tech field that did not involve coding. And so that's why I chose UX design, since more often than not, there's no coding required with it. So I did that, and with learning UX design, I had to learn all about user interfaces and accessibility, usability, user experience, all that good stuff. And it taught me a lot of good principles along the way. But as I kind of got deeper into the weeds with UX design, I sort of realized that there's not really an avenue for me to work on my own eventually, because typically, at least from what I've seen, pretty much every UX designer works for someone. There's not really a solo UX designer that kind of does their own thing, because typically a UX designer is working with like developers and product managers and things like that. They're not able to design and develop a project, right? Like they have to work with other people to do that. And so I wanted something where I could create things on my own. And so that's what led me to learn Webflow development, or design development, whatever you want to call it. But the reason I gravitated towards it is the thing that I liked most with sort of my UX design journey, and mainly like with working in Figma, the thing that I liked the most is really, while I liked designing in Figma and mocking up designs, arguably the thing that I liked more is getting things to work within auto layout. So it's like, okay, I have this design that I've made in Figma, but how do I actually get this to work? How do I set this in auto layout so that it is developer ready? And I had the most fun doing that, as opposed to the actual mocking up designs and mood boarding and all that. I mean, it's not to say that I disliked that sort of a thing, but when I think about when I really lost track of time, which to me is a sign that I really enjoy something, when I lost track of time was when I was trying to make things, trying to fit things into auto layout. And that led really nicely to Webflow design development, because that was essentially taking that to an entirely new level. So whereas a lot of designers will use something like Framer to develop a web page because it's very similar to Figma, I liked the sort of developer syntax of Webflow because it felt it just feels like a puzzle to me. And it was still no coding. And that was, again, one of the things that I was pretty firm on when I wanted to get into tech. And the reason, by the way, to give just a very brief tangent and then I'll come back, but the reason that I wanted to do a tech field that did not involve coding was because when I actually started in undergrad, I was a computer science major. And the reason that I dropped out of computer science was, well, frankly, because it was too hard. Let me put that in quotes. It was too hard. Mainly, I didn't have the grit to push through. I didn't have a lot of motivation when I started off in college, and so I quit things that were difficult. I didn't try to push through and try to solve things on my own. And so because of that, we were learning Java at the time, and once we got into object-oriented programming, it became too difficult for me. Or at least that's what I told myself, and at the advice of my guidance counselors, I feel like they call them something else in college. Academic advisor, I think is what they call them. My academic advisor urged me. She was like, no, I really don't think it's a good idea to drop out of this, Josh. If it's just difficult, just keep going with it and it'll get better. But alas, I did not take that very insightful advice, and I did my own thing, and I dropped out of computer science to pursue what I later did, which is physical therapy. All right, so, which by the way was probably just as difficult, but in a different way, and took longer. But that's a whole other thing. So that's why I decided that when I wanted to get into tech, I wanted to do something that did not involve coding, because I thought of the bad experience that I had in undergrad, and I didn't want to relive that. So I wanted to do something that was maybe more creative, so to speak, and that wasn't so programmer heavy. I didn't want to develop, did not want to do code. And so that fit well with me wanting to do Webflow, because again, there's no code involved with that, but it also aligned with my joy of putting together websites. And again, the thing that I liked about Figma was putting things in auto layout, and because with Webflow there is no freeform canvas, I have to use all of the different HTML and CSS elements to make it work, and I really enjoyed that. And so I worked on that for, let me think, I probably worked to get better at that for probably a year or so. And I really enjoyed it. I made quite a few websites with it, and each website I tried to implement features that I didn't do on a previous website to continue to challenge my growth and whatnot. And then it came to a point where I felt like I had a pretty good grasp on the native features of Webflow. So I felt like I had a pretty good grasp of that. I was like, yeah, I can pretty much do most of the things in Webflow. Am I like an expert, a guru at it? Hell no. But I can pretty much do what I need to do, at least within the native features of Webflow. So then that got me thinking, like, well, where do I go from here? Because there's really two paths that I can take, at least that I can see. There could be more. But the two paths that I sort of saw were, well, I could go into the design heavy route and learn all these crazy designs that I see on like the Webflow showcase and that website that's called A Awards but with 3 W's, and I can try to learn how to do just like those crazy looking websites, which to be honest was I would be interested in. But then I thought, well, there's the other side of it too, and the other option to me, which was, how do I learn how to get more functionality within my websites? And that would require more custom code. And so I thought about which one I would be more interested in. And to me, I think the design stuff is cool. Don't get me wrong. Like, I think that is very fun to learn, like how to use these very advanced animations and stuff, and just very advanced design principles. Like, that is alluring. But when I think about what I want to actually get out of this, I want to be able to like solve a problem. And if you make a landing page for a company, let's say, and you have one that looks reasonable, and then you have one that looks crazy, like with all these fancy animations and all that, at the end of the day, is that website with the fancy animations really gonna make that much of a difference? In fact, I would argue that a lot of the websites that I go to that do have those fancy animations, let's pause for the car. Waiting. That was actually a logging truck. Yeah, I'm in Harrisonburg, Virginia, which I'll talk about later in this video, maybe. But when I think about those fancy websites that I go to, I'm either in two mindsets when I go to those websites. One is I'm looking for design inspiration, in which case I'm looking at that website like, whoa, look how amazing this looks and how incredibly well done it is and detail oriented. However, there's the other mindset where if I'm going to a website as a consumer and I see one of those very design heavy websites with a lot of interactions, a lot of times it pisses me off. And the reason is I'm noticing my camera keeps shaking, so hopefully it's looking kind of steady on your end. If I go to one of those websites where there are a lot of interactions, it pisses me off because I can't scroll through, or sometimes it'll scroll jack and it'll give me like this horizontal scrolling, which nothing annoys me more as a user than horizontal scrolling. I hate it, and I have vowed to almost never put it in any of my designs because for whatever reason it does not feel good to me. When I scroll down, I am to scroll down. If I want to scroll to the side, I'll use a slider or something. Like, I cannot stand, this is just a personal thing, but I cannot stand horizontal scroll. I cannot stand slow animations where things fade in slower than they should. And so when I think about a landing page for a website and you have one that has no animations but looks reasonable, like frankly, a lot of popular landing pages are like that. You look at something like DoorDash, you look at something like Uber, Lyft, their websites are not complicated at all. And so could those websites be like highly designed? Yeah, but the whole point of what I'm trying to make is that changing anything? Is having all these complex animations and all these crazy interactions at the end of the day resulting in something functional? And I would argue a lot of times no. In fact, some of the times it's probably hurting whatever the goal of the website is, if it's to gather leads or whatever. So taking that back to the crossroads I was at, or rather the fork in the road of what I wanted to sort of pursue, I could pursue that more design heavy thing, but will that actually solve a problem, or does that just make a website more cluttered? So then I decided to go more towards how do I implement more functionality in my websites? Because here's the thing, like if I learn more custom code to implement more functionality, that functionality can actually solve a problem. So instead of just creating a website where it's just a landing page, I'm now on a path to where I can create something that actually serves a purpose. Now, what is that purpose? I don't know yet, but it opens the door for a lot more things, in my opinion, as opposed to if I just try to get good at design, then the only thing I'll ever really be able to do is create a really good landing page. But if I learn and go into the custom code aspect of things, I can create stuff that actually, where people can actually take different types of actions on a website. Again, I'm being kind of nebulous here because I don't have like a project that I'm working on that really exemplifies this. But I liked that avenue. And so the thing that sort of has surprised me and really kind of like, I'm trying to like sum up the entire thesis of this video on why this tech journey has been so surprising to me is the thing that I tried to avoid is now the thing that I'm actively trying to learn. So in the beginning, I was actively avoiding coding. That's why I decided to do UX design. And now I'm knee deep in JavaScript. And so I'm taking this Udemy course, which has been like really well done. I mean, it's a masterclass of a course. And not even like a masterclass of a course, but it's a masterclass in how one should set up a course. It's just super good. And so I've been working on this JavaScript course, and the thing about it is that there's a lot of neat things to it, but there's a lot of complex aspects to it as well. And frankly, there's a lot of boring things about it too. But because I'm in a much different mindset than I was in undergrad, I have a lot more stick-to-itness than I did back then. And so there are some things that I'm learning. Like right now I'm working on like arrays, destructuring arrays, working with arrays within objects and stuff. A lot of it is, well, one, complex, but frankly, some of it is boring. Because some of the stuff we're not working with any sort of UI, so it's just code. And that can be, frankly, quite boring. And the sort of feedback loop of me wanting to continue is low. However, I know the potential of what this can offer me. And so because of that, I feel like I'm able to get through the slog much better than I was in undergrad. And so yeah, that's sort of been my path lately, is working with JavaScript. And, you know, I don't know where that's going to take me. Is that going to be me wanting to get a front-end developer job? I don't know. Like if there's one other thing that this sort of tech journey has taught me, and something that I've reflected on, is that it is the least linear path that I've ever been on. Well, I don't know ever, but certainly one of the more non-linear paths that I've been on. That's not a bad thing per se. There are people who choose to get into tech, and they pick a field, whether it's UX design or product management or software development. They pick that path and they just go. And I do have to applaud those people, because they don't get shiny object syndrome. They don't, pivot from one thing to another. Whereas with me, I wouldn't necessarily say I have shiny object syndrome, but I do have a lot of self-doubt on whether or not a path I have chosen is the one that I really want to do. And I think like the metric that I've learned for that now is asking myself, is what I'm going towards cater towards what I actually want to do? And so with UX design, I could confidently say no, because there was just no real avenue of doing that on my own, at least so far as I can see. I'm sure there are UX designers who work on their own in some sort of a freelance capacity, but it's just, from what I see, it's not the norm. Most, like I said, are working at a job, either startup or, a FANG company, some sort of big tech company. And so that's sort of was a reasonable reason for why I didn't want to do that. It wasn't because it was hard. I mean, there are difficult aspects to it, but there was an actual reason to why I wanted to pivot. And I think that's something worth knowing. Is always asking, like, why am I pivoting out of something? Because if I'm pivoting because it's hard, well, that's not really a valid reason. And so I try to be like really, especially since that was the trend that I did in undergrad, where I would quit when things got hard. I really try to ask myself why I pivot out of things. And so yeah, like with what I'm doing now with JavaScript, it's hard, but I see where this can align with a future goal that I have for myself, where I could sure get a job in front-end development at some point, but I could also build things on my own, which also sounds really neat as well. And yeah, I think it just opens the door for a lot of creativity. Because the thing is that if I just stick with Webflow development, I can only ever make a web page. That's it. Like, my skill set is I make web pages. And there's nothing wrong with that. Like, I like making them, but I also, it'd be nice to have the ability to make something else, something that serves a purpose, whether that's a web app or whatever. It'd be nice to at least have that skill set. And so that's why, yeah, that's kind of like why I'm embarking on this journey. And I know it's going to take a while. Like, I certainly did not sign up for an easy path. But then again, like, this is also why I decided to go back to getting a job. Because I quit my job 4 months ago to try to, make this thing happen with, well, at the time, being a Webflow developer. But there was always this crunch time, or this feeling of pressure to, I gotta make it because my money is dropping every month. And it just wasn't a really fun place to be. So now that I'm doing travel contracts as a physical therapist, that pressure is now lifted, and I can do things at my own pace. And while I still want to learn things quickly, there's no internal deadline in my head, because now my savings isn't rapidly depleting. And I think that's a good place to be. Because while I've said before where quitting my job can sort of light a fire to make me work harder, it also doesn't mentally put me in a great spot. Because there's always that stress and that pressure of trying to make things happen. And I think when I try to force a timeline that isn't there, or when I try to force something to happen that isn't ready to happen, it just causes a lot more stress than really what I want out of life. Yeah, so I think I'm sort of adopting this sort of slow growth mindset where, I'm still working towards my goals. I have no intention of quitting what I'm doing. I have no intention of quitting, of not learning web design anymore, not learning the programming coding aspect. I have every intention of continuing to do that. It's just, I feel like for me, it's better to do it in the background of working a job, which I think a lot of other people do. I think probably the less common thing is to burn the ships and quit your job and try to go all in. For some people it works, and I think for that, in order for that to work, you have to have a very clear plan of what you want to do. And someone pointed that out to me in one of the comments it was one of my recent videos. Someone pointed out that it doesn't sound like I had a very clear plan of what I wanted to do. And you're right, I didn't. And like, even now, I still don't. Like, the thing that I'm really trying to do now is I'm just trying to learn stuff. That is my goal. I am no longer trying to actively make money my goal. Because the problem is that whenever I try to make money my goal, so trying to monetize web design and development, it makes the journey less fun. So I'd rather just try to focus my journey on just upskilling. How do I just get really good at this? And I believe that this is sort of a hypothesis I'm testing, but I think that the better that I get at something, the more opportunities will present themselves to me. And so that's sort of where I am along this journey, is instead of trying to convince people that I'm good at something where, frankly, I have a lot of self-limiting belief that I'm not as good as maybe I say I am to other people. I'd rather just focus that energy on actually trying to get really good at said thing and work on projects that actually serve a purpose and things of that nature. So yeah, with that journey, I think it just takes longer. But for everyone, their path is going to be a little bit different, and that's okay. And that's sort of the thing that I've had to come to realize is there's a lot of different paths that I can take when it comes to tech. And there are people who adopt a faster path, and there are people who adopt a slower path. But there is no correct path. There is no ideal path. It's just picking something, and that's going to look different for everyone. And so I know, like, the path that I've taken is very unique to me, and a lot of people probably would not want to adopt a path that I've taken, because it is a slow path and it has been quite a pivoty path. But ever since the start, my goal with this channel is to document my journey. And for some people, they may resonate with this being a very windy journey, and I never claim to have everything figured out. And I think maybe that's part of the allure that some of you might have to this channel, is it's real, and I try to keep it that way, and I don't try to paint things with a colorful brush saying, oh, it's very straightforward, you just do A, B, and C, and then you can bam get a job in tech or whatever. No, I mean, there's a lot of little hurdles that I have to go through, whether that's logistical hurdles or just like internal mindset hurdles that I have to kind of come to terms with. And so yeah, every journey is unique, and that's sort of the cool thing, is that there's no right journey, there's just your journey. And I think as long as we're trying to improve ourselves in some capacity and not content just being stagnant, then I think that's admirable. Because if you think about what the vast majority of people do in life, it's being stagnant. And so I know that if you're watching this, you're probably one of the people that do want to improve yourself, whether that's professionally or personally. And just know that if you're one of those people, you're amongst a very rare few. And so I think as long as we're trying to do that, then we're on the right path. But with that said, I think I've said my piece. So I hope you've enjoyed this video, and yeah, I'll see you in the next one. Bye-bye.